Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for our second ever FuturePedsRes LGBTQ webinar. We are so excited to have you, and we have lots of great questions prepared for you tonight. My name is Catherine Geico. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a fourth-year medical student at the Virginia College of Osteopathic Medicine in Blacksburg, Virginia, and I'm serving as one of the co-directors for FuturePedsRes this year.
Hi, everyone. My name is Estelle Green. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a fourth-year medical student at the Penn State College of Medicine in the University Park curriculum, located in the Happy Valley of State College, Pennsylvania. And I am serving as the other co-director for FuturePedsRes this year. So our original webinar series will be kicking off in a couple weeks, very exciting. On Monday, July 31st, we will have our residency programs from the Southeast region. Then on Thursday, August 3rd, we will feature residency programs from the Pacific West region. A breakdown of each region is included in the webinar link registration, which we'll be sharing in the chat. This is a one-time registration for all of our webinars. Feel free to join by clicking the link we share in the chat or by scanning the QR code that you see on your screen.
Before we start, we would like to acknowledge our APPD faculty advisor, Dr. Michael Dell, the Vice Chair for Education at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine, as well as Colleen Hughes, the Associate Executive Director for APPD.
We would also like to acknowledge our ComSet faculty advisor, Dr. Rachel Thompson, who's the Assistant Professor of Pediatrics and Director of Pediatric Undergraduate Medical Education at the Boston University Chobanian and Abedian School of Medicine. These individuals have made tonight possible, and we're very grateful for their support.
It is now our pleasure to introduce you to the Assistant Director of Equity for LGBTQ applicants, Eduarda Casali Vicente. Her pronouns are she, her. Eda is a graduate of Pontifical Catholic University of Rio Grande do Sul. She is from an Italian family born and raised in Porto Alegre in the extreme south of Brazil, and years later, her family moved to Pennsylvania. We are so excited to have you all with us, and we hope the information that you learned today will be super valuable throughout the Match 2024 season.
Thank you, Catherine, for the lovely intro, and good night, everyone. So thank you all again for tuning in tonight. It has been an amazing time planning this webinar, and I would like to thank the entire FuturePedsRes team, especially the webinars, equity and publicity team, for working hard to make this happen. So speaking of, we would like to briefly introduce our FuturePedsRes webinar team working hard behind the scenes tonight, Denise and Cassandra. And so now let's delve into our objectives. So our objectives for tonight's LGBTQ+ session are to provide LGBTQ+ residency applicants with tools towards empowering themselves as strong applicants for Match 2024 residency cycle, advice on finding mentors and sponsors to help navigate the virtual season, and recommendations on how to avoid major pitfalls. From 8 to 9, we have faculty here to share advice for applicants and answer your much anticipated questions. We have prepared 4 questions for the panelists. Then we will take questions from the audience. Afterwards, our amazing faculty panel will log off, and our resident panel will join us from 9 to 9:30 to share their experiences and answer any questions from the audience. So let's jump right into introductions. If you have a question, please tweet it and add the hashtag FPR webinar or drop it in the chat section on Zoom, which can be found on your Zoom toolbar. And now the moment you've all been waiting for. On behalf of FuturePedsRes, I'd like to give a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists for tonight. Our first panelist is Dr. Brian Lurie, the Pediatric Residency Program Director at Hasbro Children's Hospital of Brown University. So hello, Dr. Larry. Dr. Larry graduated from Tufts University and earned his medical degree from the Sackler School of Medicine, New York State American Program in Tel Aviv, Israel, and obtained his Master of Public Health from Columbia University's Mayo School of Public Health after completing his residency at North Shore Children's Hospital in New York. So Dr. Larry is experienced in developing curricula for pediatrics residents on caring for patients who are LGBTQ+. He has published on this topic and has given multiple talks and led workshops nationally, focusing on LGBTQ+ care, diversity and inclusion, and social justice in medicine. Most recently, he has contributed with the development and implementation of the Levine Children's Center for Gender Health. Dr. Larry has also served as the co-chair of the both APPD's LGBTQ+ learning community and as the founder and co-chair of the APA's LGBTQ Health and Wellness Special Interest Group. Our next esteemed panelist is Dr. Brett Cooper, who is an assistant professor of pediatrics at UT Southwestern and an adolescent medicine physician at Children's Medical Center, Dallas. Hello, Dr. Cooper. Dr. Cooper has presented nationally and regionally on topics such as HIV, PrEP, and LGBTQ+ health, and was an author on the Society for Adolescent Health and Medicine position paper on HIV PrEP. He is currently one of the co-chairs of the LGBTQ+ Special Interest Group for the Society of Adolescent Health and Medicine. Dr. Cooper completed his medical training at the Wright State University Boonshoft School of Medicine, Dayton, Ohio, his pediatrics residency at the University of Toledo Medical Center and adolescent medicine at Baylor College of Medicine, Texas Children's Hospital in Houston. Furthermore, he sees patients in the adolescent medicine clinic at Children's Medical Center in Dallas and is the co-director for the ambulatory care clerkship at UT Southwestern. Last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Dennis Spencer. Dr. Spencer is a gastroenterologist at Boston Children's Hospital, where he serves as the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for the Boston Children's Hospital Division of Gastroenterology, Hepatology, and Nutrition. He is an Associate Program Director for the Boston Combined Residency Program, Boston Children's Hospital and Boston Medical Center, and is Faculty Chair of the BCH, Boston Children's Hospital, Graduate Medical Education's Diversity, Recruitment, and Retention Subcommittee. So thank you all for being here tonight. And without further ado, let's get started with our frequent ask questions portion of tonight's webinar. If you, one of the panelists, wants to introduce themselves, so feel free to do it. So question number 1 is for Dr. Larry. What should an LGBTQ+ applicant look for while selecting programs?
Sure, that's a great question. I think that's frequently asked. I think when LGBTQ+ applicants are applying and going through the interview and residency application process, there's a lot of things they should look for in a program, but I think first and foremost is the fit and the culture of the program, and if they feel like they're going to actually fit into the particular program. And this could even start from early on in the programs you choose to apply to for your residency. You know, you may want to explore a little bit the culture in the state, the culture of the program, the institution. while you're applying and decide if that's a fit for you from the start. If you get down to the point where you feel like the program is a good fit, look, there's a lot of little things that you could look for while you're applying, and especially interviewing. So I think, easy things to look for on the interview trail is when you're interviewing, even virtually, do people in the program speak openly that they might also be LGBTQ, whether you're speaking to residents or program directors? I, for one, when I'm doing interviews and when I do the overview of the program, I have pictures in my slide presentation of diverse groups in our program, and one of them being LGBT. I have pictures of our residents who identify as LGBT with their partners. I have a picture of myself with my husband. I talk openly about my husband during the process, just so people who are applying knows that it's a safe space and it's a very open and warm environment to everybody. Look for things in the offices of the people that you're interviewing with on Zoom. I mean, all of our badges, and I brought mine just to show you, has doctor in the rainbow flag. I think it's easier to see on the back here, but look for things like that. Are there rainbow flags in the office? Are there rainbow stickers? Some people wear a rainbow caduceus pin on their lapel. So that's something else you could really look for that just lets LGBTQ plus applicants know it's a safe place to be. Ask when you have a lot of programs will have social events with the residents over Zoom the night before, or at some time during the week that you're interviewing. Ask the residents, is it an open space? Is it, are there LGBTQ plus residents in the program? How are they treated? Do they feel comfortable? Do they bring their significant others to events? These are good questions that you could ask the residents so you can get a really good feel of the program. Lastly, you could also look at the hospital's websites and see what kind of diversity and equity and inclusion programs they might have within their own institutions. So do they have system resource groups? Do they have an LGBTQ system resource group where faculty and residents can get together and celebrate different LGBT holidays or do different events? Make sure there's a non-discrimination policy at the hospital. You can ask the residents as well as the program directors if they're affiliated with a medical school. Are there groups for LGBTQ plus students? Are there groups for LGBTQ plus residents within the hospital? I think these are all ways that you'll get a good feel for the program and how open and accepting they are of all people. If you're afraid to ask some of those questions because you might not be wanting to come out on the trail, I would just look for little signs, just like the badges and the flags and things like that, just letting you know it's an open space.
So tonight we are addressing each question for a panelist, but if the other panelists want to make some comments on it, please feel free to do it. Okay.
Well, if that's the case, I would love to throw in a couple of additional things. I think it's important for the applicants to know what it is that they want from a program. If that includes opportunities to get involved in scholarship around LGBTQ, healthcare delivery, about outcomes, about other topics of particular research interest, you can see if that is something that your program supports, whether it's within that particular residency training program or even broadly, if it's part of the research agenda of the institution, because that could be something that you can become a part of if, again, that's something that you want to do. I also recommend for individuals, again, if this is something they want to pursue because there's a personal interest, for you to go on to the associated medical schools, if this is an institution that has medical school associated with it, to see opportunities for student groups. For many of us, it's important for us to pay it forward to those who are further back in the pipeline, who may be like you, just a few years behind you, nervous about being your full authentic self, and you want to be that mentor for the next generation. So that's something that is appealing to some applicants, to be able to continue that during their residency. So what are the medical school affiliations? Does that medical school have an LGBTQ type of affinity group? And then also affinity groups within the hospital. I think that it's actually very cool to be a part of like the employee resource groups or other affinity groups across the institution, because that allows you to find a community, again, if that's important to you, that's maybe even beyond your other medical trainees. And that sense of community can also help you with other kind of tricks to how to really thrive in that environment. They may be able to tell you where, the very welcoming restaurants or social establishments are. So it's just nice to see if those types of community opportunities are at the institution that you're going into. And how do you find that? You do find that often by typing in like ERG is a common type of an acronym for like employee resource group or LGBTQ affinity group within the hospital's website. So these are just some things that I think it's not necessarily obvious when you're looking at places to go to residency, but this could still all help make the difference so you don't feel isolated, so that you don't feel odd, and to make sure that you truly feel included.
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. So question number 2 is for Dr. Cooper, but again, feel free to comment on it. What are the pros and cons about being open about your sexual identity in the context of your application?
Yeah, so this is, I think, the perpetual question that gives a lot of LGBTQ applicants a lot of angst as they think about interviews and application season. So I think one of the big pros about being open is no one's going to know if you don't tell them. And I say that meaning, if for some reason something doesn't come up in the program introduction, as Dr. Lurie mentioned, where he really tries to highlight some of those things, faculty who are interviewing you or residents you might be working with, like, they can't look at you and say, hi, this person is LGBTQ and here's the things we have to offer, if they don't know. They can also try and connect you to faculty who may have an interest in things that you like. So for example, if that during that interview, something comes up about whatever it is that you're passionate about, I can't say, hey, we've got this person who does this work. I'm happy to connect you with their email if you want to reach out to them with any questions about ways that the two of you might be able to collaborate. Because I think it's also this challenge, right, that ERITS had not allowed you to identify that, but you can choose like a race or an ethnicity. And I think where I'm mentioning that from is that, at least in our program, for example, we are really trying to do a holistic review to kind of find those hidden gems. And so if I'm trying to, increase the number of LGBTQ applicants that we are interviewing, just like we're trying to look at racial and ethnic identity as well, to make sure that those folks are kind of broadly represented across our interview panel. We can't tell unless you spell that out. And there are ways that I've seen candidates, when you look at kind of here's my list of activities, I can look at it and be like, well, either this person is really a great ally or they're LGBTQ, because this is not the things that kind of your average medical student are involved in. And so the like tends to attract like to a lot of these groups. And so, I had a candidate in 2019 pre-COVID who had that. So when I read his application, all of his research was on LGBTQ health, all of his activities related to serving that population, but he never came flat out in that application and said, hi, I'm gay. And so as Dr. Lurie mentioned, when you sort of talk about his husband, I do the same thing when I interview. I'm like, hi, this is me. We live in the suburbs. This is what we do. And for that particular student, you could just watch his body language and his posture just kind of be tense. And he really sort of at least said, hey, at least there's one LGBTQ faculty here. So I think that's the pros of this, is that it really allows people to know something about you that they may not get just from kind of parsing through your application and making inferences. Because I don't like to assume that somebody is LGBTQ, because I wouldn't want somebody to make assumptions about me. But that's sort of the pro. And I think I was out during my interviews back in 2011, because I just said, I don't want to be at a place that doesn't want me to be open and who I am. And so if that means they don't rank me, so be it. But I think, this is potentially a different environment for folks. And so you really have to decide if that's what you want to do. Now, I think a con could be exactly what I just mentioned. If you're at a program and they're like conservative for that, or they really don't want to like publicize that because of state legislature funding, I don't know, whatever it might be, you being out may get you automatically excluded. And while that's, we can debate the ethics of that, it is what it is at some places. Although I would say in general, pediatrics tends to be a little more friendly to that than maybe other specialties have traditionally been in the past. And so, even in 2011, when I was at programs and I had asked about, same-sex partner benefits, because this was pre-Obergefell, and sort of having those marriages recognized across the country. No one gave me dirty looks, or nobody, said anything about that. And so I genuinely felt welcome at all the PEDS programs I applied to. And I think the con is, it also is potentially a lot of mental angst, right? And so we talk about how folks who are LGBTQ have to kind of come out over and over and over and over again, based on the contexts that you're in. And so you're in a busy season of trying to do fourth year rotations, match, do all these things. And so part of that also is you have to decide, is from a mental health standpoint, is that something that you can sort of sit in and be outwardly open during a really stressful time? And I think, there's not a harm in not being out until you match, because it's really about what's going to make you feel mentally safe and sort of whole from that standpoint. And I think, the other piece is, if you have, faculty mentors at the places that you do medical school, talk about it with them. I think, it's a great place to sort of hash out these pros and cons on an individual basis. They may know the program directors at certain institutions, and they can say like, hey, I know Brian Lurie personally myself. He's going to be a great guy if he's reviewing your applications, and you're not going to get shoved to the bottom of the pile, versus like, yeah, Dr. Smith over here, you may want to be careful with that one. And so, people tend to know people. And so use those mentors that you have locally to sort of give you the 411 on different programs, and whether that may be a place to sort of, while it's LGBTQ friendly, maybe during the application is not when you want to be out. You want to be out when you get there as an intern and be like, okay, I'm here, let's do this.
I agree with a lot of what Dr. Cooper said. I would just, probably emphasize the points about being out during the process allows you to get a much probably more actual and correct view of what the program is about. So you, especially if it's a very accepting program, because you will probably get hooked up with residents who identify as LGBTQ. You'll probably get hooked up with faculty who identify as LGBTQ. You will probably also get more information to the scholarly work that is being done that Dr. Spencer was talking about before. You'll find out if there's LGBTQ curriculum. Is it something that you could participate in? Are there gender health centers and opportunities to work with patients who are gender diverse? You'll you may learn more about these types of things if you're out, whether in the interview or on your applications. But I also think it's personal comfort and preference and where you are in the process. There was a study that came out a while back. It's probably at least 10 years old now, but it showed that many people who were completely out of medical school and actually participated in scholarly work around LGBT health or participated in advocacy around LGBTQ topics and concerns, that they went back into the closet didn't identify even when getting into residency, and they didn't come out right away in their program. So it's interesting that we sometimes take a step back when we're applying for residency.
I'll just say something that maybe something that you would not expect, and it is very program specific, but everyone is going to be different. But on my committee, when we're looking at applicants, we value all the types of diverse experiences of the applicant, and we take note. And I don't think it's really sharing too much of how the sausage is made and saying that in looking at our list, looking at the list of people that we've invited to interview, looking at the list of people that we're planning to potentially rank, we do not want a homogeneous class. We want a class that includes those who are gender diverse, those who are in the LGBTQ collective, those who come from a rural place, those who are, the first generation to go to college and med school. So like these are all demographics that receive certain notation on applications as we look at what our class looks like. So for our program, it's potentially a feather in your hat to be able to say that you add an experience that may not be like everyone else's. So I mean, it's part of the whole idea of pride, but like we should be prideful of, having our experience and what that means. I am a gay Black man from the South who went to school in the South, who identifies as Southern Baptist. I mean, that's a very specific demographic, but it brings a level of or a flavor of diversity that is unique in my program, especially around leadership. So this is something that, is celebrated, and we want you to know that you can be your whole self, and that if you feel comfortable in disclosing all of that, that many of our programs are actually taking notice of it. So I'm saying that explicitly because that is certainly something that we do at my program.
Thank you. Oh, it's very important. I will just say that it's very important for us applicants to feel represented when we look to your programs and see that see you there and your pictures and your biographics there. It's very important for us. So I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just to say it because I felt like so happy when I saw you being open on the program's pages. So thank you so much for being there for us. So question number 3 is for Dr. Spencer. What resources are currently available for LGBTQ plus applicants?
Thank you for the question, although I'll tell you, I feel like this is the most difficult question. About resources, I mean, one thing that was already mentioned, I believe, by possibly both Dr. Lurie and Dr. Cooper, is a resource is the people at your current institution and those individuals who are at the institutions that you're trying to apply to. People are, I think, the best resource in understanding what the actual culture climate is of the place that you're looking. So again, many of your faculty advisors at your current institutions know, just even from hearsay, that this is an institution that would value your differences or value your area of interest for scholarship or advocacy. So ask those questions to whomever you feel safe asking them to. Additional resources include through the ACGME. The Journal of GME actually does have a collection around LGBTQ related issues around applications. And typically around Pride, they kind of rehash some of those articles. So I just placed in the chat a link that'll take you to the ACGME's site, which will take you to certain, select journal articles that kind of talk about the experience of certain individuals when they were applying. So those who are gender diverse in particular, but some other groups within LGBTQ, and you can hear those experiences, especially if you don't have any near peers at your institution who may be experiencing that same level of trepidation and fear about how out should you be, how much of an advocate should you be, do you want to sound too, too much like an advocate or not? So that's one resource. Another resource to better understand like culture climate of the institution that you might be going to attend is using the Human Rights Campaign. They have a equity index that actually speaks to what opportunities exist at the institution that you're applying to for gender affirming care, or for even resources as an employee. Do you have protections? Do you have coverage in your insurance offerings? So that's the second link that I have put in the chat. And actually, I was told I could potentially share a screen. So let's see if I can. Oh, it looks like I can. So let me set something up in 2 seconds. But basically, to give you a sense of what in practice this looks like for the Human Rights Campaign. So hopefully you'll be able to see this, but for a previous talk, I've talked about how the Healthcare Equity Index will talk about those who are leaders in LGBTQ healthcare and equality. And you can see just, I was in Connecticut when I gave the talk. That's why I'm not picking on one place. But specifically, you can actually have a breakdown on like what composed that score. And sometimes related to issues related to opportunities for employees of that hospital to, have particular benefits. It might be that there's not safe space training at that institution or gender neutral bathrooms. So like you'll understand what that score means, but depending on if this is an important consideration for you to feel comfortable, you can use those kinds of resources too if you don't feel so comfortable asking individuals at the institution. So these are some objective measures through the Health Equity Index, but also, again, I really would just double down on if you feel comfortable talking to people. If you don't know someone who's out, some institutions have diversity APDs. That's increasingly a thing. You can reach out to them and ask, is there someone I can speak to about their experience? I have these particular concerns or these particular questions. And if they look at you weird when you ask it, or they give you some pushback, that might be useful information for you to know as well. So that's my answer. I'm actually curious if our other panelists have thoughts about specific resources.
I think, some of these things didn't really exist when I was a medical student. I'm always amazed in my clerkship director role when I'm talking to students and I'm like, wow, the internet has apparently revolutionized things. That utilizing your your fellow colleagues, but I will put an asterisk next to that for the reasons that Dr. Spencer mentioned as it relates to programs, for example. Every student or person's experience is unique. And so the asterisk to that is that those things may not apply to your particular situation, but I think it's information you can kind of collate and put together what might be best for you. So I think that's really all I would add is just utilize the experience of some of those that have gone before you or what you read. But I think just like a Yelp review, take what you read with a grain of salt because they could have been having a bad day. You know, other things may have been going on, but if you see more kind of 5 stars than 1 stars, it probably lends you in the general direction of that program.
And Dr. Spencer, you stole mine. I was going to say the Health Equity Index for the hospital. There's a lot of great articles on the American Medical Association website, as well as the AAMC, regarding what LGBTQ plus applicants can look for when applying to different programs. But doesn't speak specifically about different programs. So I was interested to hear what resources you both were going to bring as well. I do think playing around with websites is also really great. The different hospitals as well as the different the particular programs, because a lot of programs will highlight their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that they're making both in their department, in the residency program, and in their institution. I think that's helpful to get some questions to bring to the interview to make sure that it's not just lip service on the websites, but actually happening. So I think saying, oh, I noticed on your website, the Department of Pediatrics has a DEI committee. Tell me about some of those initiatives that the committee has done. And that'll get you a lot of information too, because if the answer is we really haven't done anything or we've hardly met, probably not a place that might be comfortable for you. But if it's we've done this and this and this, and we've done this for LGBTQ health, and this for gender affirming care, it's going to give you a lot of information about the program as well. And then a lot of hospitals as well have their particular DEI committees, and to find out what the hospital's doing is also great, just to learn more about the institution.
I'll just join in one more time to say, actually, I do want everyone to feel comfortable and empowered to go to a program because you just feel safe. And if you're not so interested in doing something that's particularly scholarly or particularly advocacy facing, that I understand that may not be the most important thing for some people. For some people, it's just wondering, can I go to work, not feel like I'm going to be judged, or I'll not feel like I will not feel safe in the bathroom that is my preference or something. If that's where you are, again, the Health Equity Index, when it shows how people got those scores, you know, the things that you're checking for may not be the same thing that everybody else is checking for. So, and I try to give that allowance because I do know that I'm often pushing those, because I'm very academic medicine facing, to think about scholarship or think about ways you can be an advocate. But I recognize that's not everybody's truth. And just because you are part of the community, you know, you can certainly be a part of the community and not do all that. So I want to also give people permission that may not be the most important thing for you when you're looking for a program. So whatever feels right for you, feel free to accept that. And the final thing I'm going to say is very self-serving, and I'm just going to preface it to say it's self-serving. There is the LGBT Health Workforce Conference that happens every year in New York. And that is sponsored by Building the Next Generation of Academic Physicians. I just talked about everybody doesn't need to do academic medicine, but if you're thinking academic medicine, this is the oldest and largest LGBT workforce conference. And for it being self-serving, I did co-found this organization 12 years ago. So the organization that sponsors this is something that I directly am involved in, but I would want to just put this plug for you to consider attending, because you will meet other trainees who may be interested in some of the same type of scholarship that you're doing. They are many times presenting on the work they're doing as trainees at their hospital around advocacy. And also it's really just makes you feel good when you're around people who are thriving, being their full authentic selves. Like, it gives you some inspiration. So something to consider, but it also is a resource if you're trying to figure out like what kind of niche you can carve out for yourself, staying in academic medicine and being true to some of your passions.
Thank you so much. So the last question from the frequent asked questions that we have today, we would like to open for all the panelists to comment. It is, what is the importance of identifying as LGBTQ in your respective field?
I'll answer that with one word, and that's visibility. Which I see my colleagues nodding to that. Because, I think I remember being a medical student and being like, is anyone actually gay in medicine? And, I say this, that when I came out, my mom was still working at Cincinnati Children's and was really worried about me being out when I was in residency. And she had a physician that was one of the docs in the clinic. She sort of did admin work for her. And he was like, oh, don't worry, like 25% of the people at this hospital are gay. But right, like I would never know that by seeing that. And so I think, I want to be able to, even if I don't ever talk to these students or residents, the fact that they can look and say like, oh, this person, managed to do a fellowship and they are a clerkship director and they're doing this and they see patients. It really does make it feel like, somebody who's like you can see. And whether you do LGBTQ work in your future doctor life, I mean, you don't have to do that. But I think, just the fact that people can see that, patients will notice that. Like, I am very out on Twitter and it's not a private profile. And if you Google my name, and my Twitter profile will come up in that Google results. And I've had a couple patients, comment on that in a, very neutral way. But there might be ones who see that and they're like, oh, maybe I want to be a doctor when I grow up, and I'm 16 right now. And, look, he at least is working somewhere and people don't hate him. And so it's not just for you, but it's for the little kid out there who once was you, and eventually can do that. So I think that's what I would say. And it's also a numbers thing, right? Like, we have this discussion of, a pediatrician in our community told my colleague when she joined the year before I did, well, I don't have any LGBTQ patients in my practice. No, sir, you do. You're just not asking the question. And so, I think it's really that piece of it, that we can't be counted if you're not at the table and you're not out and being there. Again, recognizing everybody's situation is totally different. I don't want somebody being like harassed or bullied or whatever, physically assaulted. Like, please don't do that. But in a space where you can be, your one act of, shall we call it, defiance to the world, can mean a lot to someone somewhere out there.
I want to also just reiterate that it's so important to have that visibility. And I was sad he took it, because that was certainly my answer. And the fact is, in every field, it's important for you to be visible, because it's not diversity for the sake of diversity. It's not just being gay for, oh, there's one, for medicine. And I will say, certainly in my career, it has led to improved patient care. Me being an out provider, and within GI, I'll tell you just how many times have I had a patient come to me, like I'm actually thinking about writing this up. I have so many young males who disclose to me they are having receptive anal sex, as we're talking about concerns around, a Crohn's disease diagnosis or other types of IBD, because they are scared to talk about this to their primary doctor. And maybe if I'm seen as a second opinion, the first GI doctor never knew. And maybe they're not asking the question. That's possible. But I also think there is a thing about just how comfortable they felt saying it to me. And again, I'm very explicit. People know that, I'm very much family. Going to do another screen share here, but certainly I make a point to like have a very welcoming clinic. I did not do the gender neutral. I am a part of the affinity group that advocated for it at our hospital, but we have gender neutral restrooms. But yes, the lanyards, like it's just very much and then I talk about my partner all the time, and I bring him to events. But all that to say, when patients come to talk to me, like I normalize that, I'm very open for you to share with me anything that you think is relevant for your GI care. And I've had so many conversations with primary care doctors talking about PrEP while on Remicade, and other things like that, which is just a unique question. But it speaks to the importance of visibility, of representation, and making it such a welcoming place for your patients to, get better care. So there's actual real world consequences to you being bold and being, again, prideful of who you are and sharing that with everyone.
Brian, before you say anything, I just wanted to piggyback off of that real quick for one thing, which is, I think we didn't talk about this in the questions, but it's also are you out in your exam room, like explicit about that. And I think the pendulum sort of swings both ways depending on things. Like I am not, like I don't walk in and be like, hi, I'm gay. Or if a patient like discloses that, because to me, I'm not the center of the focus in that exam room. And so I sort of look at it as my experience is not why we're here. We're here for that patient's experience, but I do talk about myself very often with a friend who, so I do use my personal experiences, or like my friend's mom, which in reality is my mother. And so that's how I sort of take the focus away from me, because I don't want the focus to be about me and my experiences. And so again, I think that's a piece of this puzzle to sort of piggyback off of what Dr. Spencer says, is you really have to yes, but you sort of have to navigate that a little bit. So, if again, that patient is like, hey, I saw you and your husband at this thing, I'm not gonna be like, that's my roommate. But I don't want to like make it the focus unless the patient really sort of breaks that up. So again, sort of something you may have to navigate when you're taking care of patients.
So yes, to everything that was just said, and it's hard to go last to this question because everything that Dr. Spencer and Dr. Cooper said is exactly what I wanted to say. And I'll maybe just put it in a few different words. As for the reason why we go into medicine is for patient care. And I do think whether you're out in the exam room or not to your patients, I think that's a personal choice. And that's something you can, figure out as you progress in your career. But coming in, if you identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community and you have the same thing that I said for you to look at in different programs, or people on their on the badge, is there any indication that you're a welcoming, accepting physician or provider? That's also going to make your patient feel more comfortable, because the patients that need to see it are going to see it. The patients that don't need to see it may see it or may not see it, and it might not matter to their lives, but it will matter to the lives of some of your patients. And just because you're part of the community, it already makes you a content expert in this field. For your patients, when they come into that room, you have your own life experiences that you could bring to that encounter. You have your own empathy that you could bring to that encounter. Tying that into your fellow residents, you become the content expert for them as well. because you will be asked questions of what's the best way I could ask this question? What do I do if I make a mistake and say, use a pronoun that the patient did not want me to use, or a name that the patient did not want me to use? What do I do in those situations? You will probably have some already life experience that will help your fellow residents and lead them to be better doctors in this field as well, in working with LGBTQ plus youth. And I also think just being visible in the hospital, people are going to, even whether it is scholarship or advocacy, if it's any of that stuff you want to do, you might get tagged to do it. And sometimes that does get tiring too at the end, a little bit of feeling the stress that everyone comes to me for these things, but it's actually opened up a lot of opportunities for me and got me a lot of national positions and got me involved in a lot of national work, developing a curriculum. Dr. Cooper and I are working together on finalizing the curriculum right now and creating an EPA around LGBTQ plus health and objectives and for what we should be teaching. So it opens up a lot of doors in your career that you might not have recognized could be opened up, which is something that happened in my life just by coming out. I mean, I was sitting at an APPD meeting, and I tell this story all the time. And it was the first time that the learning community came together for LGBTQ plus health. And we joked, it was in this conference, it was at a hotel, and every other learning community had a room that was visible and like right up front. And we got put down the hall right next to the closet with all the cleaning supplies. And we were put into this room. And we all immediately felt marginalized, but came together in that room as a community because we all identified either as LGBTQ plus or as allies to the community. And I was listening to the first meeting, all we did was go around the room and talk about why we were in that room together. And I was one of the last ones to go, and I listened to everyone's story. And I told my story at that time and then asked a question. All I asked is, why don't we get taught this in medical school and residency? Because at that time, there was very little curricula around this. And everyone in the room looked at me and said, yeah, why don't we? Why don't you do something about it? And I said, no, I'm just asking the question. I don't know what to do. But it opened up a lot of opportunities for me just by even asking that question, because it was something that I recognized I didn't have up until that point. So I think it's going to open up opportunities, visibility, but also not to reduce any of us to a number, because we're not a number. But I think it's also good to collect that data and know how many people who identify as LGBTQ plus are out there caring for the patients and the kids that we're caring for. And lastly, one last thing too, it helps all future med students who are going into residency as well. Because all of a sudden they're going to be looking at your programs where you end up and saying, oh, look, that's an open program, or I could talk to this particular resident and find out their experiences. So it's going to help every other person who's currently in your situation in the future.
Thank you. So, and now we would like to open the floor to any questions that we have from Zoom and Twitter. I see that we have here a question from registration. How to ask questions about support for reproductive health services and gender affirmation services.
It's an interesting question in that the question, I think, is more, I guess it could also be how to ask, but also when to ask. There are second looks that many institutions do, and in the world of, after COVID, and there's restrictions on how second looks work. There are more difficulties in attending a second look, but we hold a diversity specific second look for all of our training programs. And at that time, we certainly get questions about that. about the types of resources, supports through insurance programs the residents can become a part of around reproductive health in general. People are often curious about, can I freeze my eggs? But also around gender affirming care, if this is something that might be covered. This is also going to be state specific, but opportunities like that, I think, are the most obvious times where, you know, we're asking for our diverse candidates to ask us the hard questions, and hopefully we have good answers for you. If you don't have an opportunity for like a diversity specific second look, before you are putting in your rank list, because I think on the day of your initial interview, maybe consider doing it, but I would say maybe focus on other parts of the program. But then when you're refining your list, and these are the things that really are going to make a difference, you can reach out to programs. You can reach out if you want to the chief resident, but you certainly could also reach out to the APD or the PD. It's just more restrictions on us reaching out to you. And those are reasonable questions to ask. I think what's embedded in that question is it safe for me to ask? Is someone going to be upset with me for asking? Is there any negative that should come to me for that? And my response would be, if someone views that as a problematic question, then that again may speak to something that you want to consider about that program. I think the more other problem would be if they don't know how to answer, but I would still hope that they would then do the legwork themselves to figure out how can they answer it for you, who can they ask, and who can they connect you to.
So thank you for the questions, and thank you all for answering. So since it's getting closer to an hour, we would like to thank you again, Dr. Lurie, Dr. Cooper, and Dr. Spencer for their insightful comments tonight and their continuous work supporting LGBTQ plus students, health workers, and patients. I think that I can speak for other LGBTQ physicians and medical students and candidates that it's very important to us, and we really appreciate you being representing us and the work that you're doing. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Best of luck to everyone.
Thank you so much. So next, we'll be transitioning to our resident fellow-led panel. Students and other participants, we ask that you stay on if you have any questions for them.
And as application and interview season get into full swing, we want to remind you that we will be starting our webinar series featuring programs from across the country in 2 weeks. We have a one-time registration link for all of the webinars. You can sign up for all of them at once, and we'll drop that in the chat. You can also scan the QR code on the screen, and that will take you to the same link to sign up for all of our webinars.
And to stay tuned for all things FuturePedsRes, give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, and sign up for the listserv on our websites. We're also going to be dropping a link in the chat for an anonymous survey for quality improvement and questions you would like answered about this year's ERAS application cycle.